There's a conversation happening right now that you're not aware of. It's taking place in the silences between your words, in the pauses before someone responds, in the way they shift their posture when you speak. Machiavelli understood this hidden language 5 centuries ago when he wrote that men are so simple and so ready to obey present necessities that one who deceives will always find those who allow themselves to be deceived. The question isn't whether you've been manipulated. The question is how many times today alone. You're sitting across from someone who seems genuinely interested in your life. They ask thoughtful questions, remember small details from previous conversations, and their eyes light up when you share your dreams. You feel seen. You feel valued. But what you don't realize is that every question has been calculated, every pause strategically placed, every compliment measured for maximum impact. This person isn't building a relationship with you. They're building a file. According to Machiavelli, everyone sees what you appear to be, but few experience what you really are. The master manipulator understands this paradox intimately. They know that your perception of them matters far more than their actual intentions. They've studied the architecture of human trust and discovered exactly where to place the explosives. By the time you recognize what's happening, the foundation has already crumbled. But here's what most people never learn. Manipulation only works because it follows patterns, and patterns can be recognized. Once you see the game, you can't unsee it. The manipulator's toolkit hasn't changed much since Machiavelli walked the corridors of Florentine power. The techniques have simply evolved, adapted to modern life, disguised behind therapy language and self-help terminology. What once required face-to-face interaction now happens through carefully crafted text messages. What once took weeks of grooming now occurs in a single conversation over coffee. The speed has increased, but the underlying mechanics remain hauntingly familiar. Machiavelli said it is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both, but the modern manipulator has discovered something far more effective, being needed. When someone makes themselves indispensable to your emotional survival, they don't need your fear or your love. They have something more valuable. They have your dependency. These 7 tricks represent the evolution of manipulation, refined over centuries, perfected through countless victims, and deployed every single day against people who believe they're too smart to fall for such obvious tactics. The first trick begins with a gift. Not the kind of gift you ask for, but the kind that arrives unexpectedly, wrapped in thoughtfulness, delivered with impeccable timing. Machiavelli discovered that benefits should be conferred gradually so that they may be better enjoyed. The manipulator understands this principle in reverse. They front-load generosity, overwhelming you with unexpected kindness before you've had time to build appropriate boundaries. Someone offers to help with a project you mentioned casually 3 weeks ago. They remember your coffee order without asking. They send you an article that's eerily relevant to a problem you're facing. Each gesture feels personal, thoughtful, proof that someone finally understands you. What you're experiencing is strategic reciprocity, and it's being deployed with surgical precision. The psychology is devastatingly simple. Human beings are hardwired to return favors. We feel genuine discomfort when someone gives without receiving. This isn't cultural conditioning. This is evolutionary programming. When someone does something kind for us, our nervous system creates a sense of debt that demands resolution. The manipulator knows this. They're not being generous. They're making an investment. According to Machiavelli, the first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him. The manipulator inverts this wisdom. They estimate your boundaries by seeing what gifts you'll accept. Each favor you receive is a test. How much can they give before you feel obligated? How personal can they get before you pull back? They're not gathering information about your preferences. They're mapping your psychological defenses. The crucial moment comes later, sometimes weeks after the initial generosity. They need something. It's always framed as small, reasonable, barely worth mentioning. After everything they've done for you, this tiny request seems almost insulting to refuse. You say yes without thinking because the debt feels real. You've just been purchased, and the price was lower than you'd ever admit. The gift wasn't kindness. It was down payment on your compliance. And the most disturbing part? You'll defend them when others suggest you've been manipulated, because acknowledging the truth means admitting you were bought. The second trick operates through incremental commitment. Machiavelli said that one change always leaves the way open for the introduction of another. The manipulator doesn't ask for what they actually want. They ask for something so small that refusing would seem absurd. They ask if you have a minute to talk. They ask if you'd mind answering one quick question. They ask for advice on something trivial. You say yes because the request costs you nothing. What you don't realize is that you've just opened a door that will never fully close. That minute becomes 10, becomes 30, becomes an hour of your evening sacrificed to someone else's emotional needs. That quick question multiplies into a lengthy consultation. That trivial advice request transforms into you solving their entire problem while they watch. You're not helping anymore. You're being harvested. According to Machiavelli, the promise given was a necessity of the past, but the word broken is a necessity of the present. The manipulator uses your first yes as evidence of a relationship that doesn't exist. Because you helped once, they assume you've agreed to help always. Because you answered one question, they believe you've become their on-call consultant. They've rewritten the terms of your interaction without your consent. The technique works because humans need consistency. We want our actions to align with our self-image. If you see yourself as helpful, refusing a small request creates cognitive dissonance. The manipulator exploits this need ruthlessly. Each small yes makes the next request easier to justify. You're not making individual decisions anymore. You're protecting a narrative about who you are. Watch how they frame subsequent requests. They'll reference your previous help as proof of your character. You're always so generous with your time. They're not complimenting you. They're fortifying the cage. Machiavelli understood that men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand, because it belongs to everybody to see you, but to few to come in touch with you. The manipulator ensures you see yourself through their lens, as the generous person who always says yes, until saying no feels like betraying your own identity. By then, they've trained you so thoroughly that they barely need to ask anymore. The third trick involves rewriting reality itself. Machiavelli said that men in general judge more from appearances than from reality. All men have eyes, but few have the gift of penetration. The manipulator uses this truth as their foundation, understanding that your memory is more flexible than you'd ever want to believe. They don't argue with your version of events. They simply offer an alternative so compelling that you begin to doubt what you know happened. You remember a conversation clearly. They said they'd handle something important. The deadline passes. Nothing happens. When you bring it up, they look genuinely confused. They never said that. You must have misunderstood. Are you sure you're remembering correctly? They say it with such conviction, such authentic bewilderment, that something inside you shifts. Maybe you did misunderstand. Maybe your memory is playing tricks. This is gaslighting in its purest form, and it's far more common than most people realize. The manipulator isn't trying to convince you that black is white. They're introducing just enough doubt that you stop trusting your own perception. According to Machiavelli, it is not titles that honor men, but men that honor titles. The manipulator understands that it's not facts that shape reality, but whoever controls the narrative about those facts. They'll use specific phrases that sound like concern while dismantling your confidence. You seem really stressed lately. You've been forgetting things. Are you sleeping okay? Each question plants a seed of self-doubt. If you're stressed, forgetful, and tired, then of course you might be misremembering. The manipulation isn't in what they're denying. It's in making you question your own mind. Machiavelli discovered that the one who adapts his policy to the times prospers, and likewise the one whose policy clashes with the demands of the times does not. The gaslighter adapts their story constantly, always staying just close enough to plausible that you can't definitively prove them wrong. They're not lying. They're creating a fog where certainty dies. And in that fog, your version of reality holds no more weight than theirs. Eventually, you stop arguing. You stop trusting yourself. You start asking them what really happened because your own memory has become unreliable. The fourth trick cycles between heaven and hell with calculated precision. Machiavelli said that men ought either to be well treated or crushed because they can avenge themselves of lighter injuries, but of more serious ones they cannot. The emotional manipulator has refined this into an art form. They shower you with affection until you're intoxicated by their presence, then withdraw so completely you feel like you're dying from the absence. The beginning feels like destiny. They text constantly, sharing thoughts you didn't know you had. They make plans weeks in advance, building a future you can almost touch. They introduce you to friends, include you in their world, make you feel chosen in a way you've never experienced. Your nervous system floods with dopamine, oxytocin, the neurochemical cocktail of early attachment. You're not falling for a person. You're becoming addicted to a feeling they've manufactured. Then something shifts. The text's slow. Plans get canceled. They're suddenly busy, distant, preoccupied with things they won't explain. You review every conversation, searching for what you did wrong. The withdrawal is so complete, so unexplained, that you're left grasping at shadows. According to Machiavelli, where the willingness is great, the difficulties cannot be great. The manipulator has made you so willing to please them that you'll do anything to restore what you've lost. This is intermittent reinforcement, and it's the same mechanism that makes gambling addictive. When rewards come unpredictably, we become obsessed with figuring out the pattern. You're not in a relationship anymore. You're pressing a lever hoping for the next hit of validation. The manipulator knows that constant affection creates complacency, but affection that disappears and returns at random creates desperation. Machiavelli understood that benefits should be conferred gradually, but punishments should be inflicted all at once. The emotional manipulator inverts this. They give you everything at once, then take it away slowly enough that you keep hoping it will return. You stop noticing your own needs because you're too busy trying to resurrect a feeling that was engineered to be unsustainable. By the time you realize the pattern, you're so psychologically dependent that leaving feels impossible. The fifth trick controls what you know and when you know it. Machiavelli said that the one who adapts his policy to the times prospers. The information manipulator adapts reality to their needs by ensuring you never have the complete picture. They parcel out truth in fragments, carefully curated to lead you toward conclusions that serve their interests while making you believe you've arrived there independently. They tell you about a job opportunity, but leave out crucial details about the toxic work environment. They share part of a conversation, but omit the context that would change its meaning entirely. They answer your questions truthfully, but only the questions you know to ask. According to Machiavelli, never was anything great achieved without danger. The manipulator eliminates your ability to assess danger by ensuring you never see it clearly. This isn't lying in the traditional sense. Everything they tell you is technically true, but truth without context is its own form of deception. They're showing you individual puzzle pieces while hiding the box that reveals what picture you're supposed to be building. You make decisions based on incomplete data, then blame yourself when those decisions lead to disaster. Watch how they respond when you discover information they didn't share. They never apologize for withholding. They express surprise that you didn't already know. They suggest you never asked. They make your ignorance your responsibility while they controlled every piece of information you had access to. Machiavelli discovered that men are so simple and so ready to obey present necessities that one who deceives will always find those who allow themselves to be deceived. The most insidious part is how they position themselves as your primary source of truth. They discourage you from seeking outside perspectives. They suggest that others don't understand the situation like they do. They create an information ecosystem where all roads lead back to them. You're not being informed anymore. You're being programmed. And because you believe you're making informed choices, you never question whose information you're actually receiving or what crucial details remain forever out of reach. The sixth trick weaponizes your need for belonging. Machiavelli said that men nearly always follow the tracks made by others and proceed in their affairs by imitation. The manipulator understands that social proof isn't just persuasive, it's almost impossible to resist. They don't convince you directly. They orchestrate a chorus of voices that makes disagreement feel like isolation. They casually mention that everyone agrees with their perspective on something controversial. They reference conversations you weren't part of where consensus was reached. They use phrases like "we all think" and "nobody believes" to create an illusion of unanimous opinion. You're not being asked to agree. You're being told that disagreement means standing alone against the group. According to Machiavelli, the promise given was a necessity of the past, but the word broken is a necessity of the present. The manipulator promises you belonging if you conform, but that promise is always conditional. Step out of line, question the narrative, express doubt, and watch how quickly the consensus turns against you. They've built a house of cards held together by fear of exclusion. This technique is particularly effective in work environments and social groups. The manipulator positions themselves as the interpreter of collective opinion. They tell you what the team thinks, what everyone wants, what we've all agreed on. You never get to verify these claims directly because the conversation supposedly happened elsewhere, before you arrived, in spaces you don't have access to. Machiavelli understood that it is unnecessary for a prince to have all the good qualities, but it is very necessary to appear to have them. The manipulator doesn't need actual consensus. They just need you to believe consensus exists. They're manufacturing social proof, creating the appearance of majority opinion to pressure you into compliance. The trap closes when you start self-censoring. You stop sharing contrary opinions because you've been convinced nobody else shares them. You doubt your own judgment because everyone else supposedly sees things differently. You're not being persuaded anymore. You're being quarantined from your own thoughts, isolated inside a narrative where the only acceptable perspective is the one the manipulator has decided serves their purposes. The seventh trick creates urgency where none exists. Machiavelli said that urgency is the mother of audacity. The manipulator manufactures crisis to bypass your rational decision-making process. They don't give you time to think. They don't allow you to consult others. They create a false deadline that forces you to choose between immediate action and catastrophic loss. Someone tells you about an incredible opportunity, but it expires tonight. They need your answer now. They can't hold the position, can't save the spot, can't guarantee the terms if you wait. Every piece of your intuition screams to slow down, but the clock is ticking. You make decisions in minutes that should take weeks because the alternative is watching opportunity evaporate before your eyes. According to Machiavelli, the innovator makes enemies of all those who prospered under the old order. The manipulator uses artificial scarcity to position themselves as the only path to something you desperately want. They're not offering you opportunity. They're engineering a fear response that makes rational evaluation impossible. Your prefrontal cortex shuts down. Your amygdala takes over. You're in survival mode, and survival mode doesn't ask questions. Watch how conveniently the deadline appears. It's always just urgent enough to prevent due diligence, but never so absurd that you recognize the manipulation immediately. They've calculated exactly how much time pressure it takes to override your better judgment. Machiavelli discovered that where the willingness is great, the difficulties cannot be great. They've made you so willing to seize the opportunity that difficulties like, "I need to think about this," become unbearable. The trap has multiple layers. If you do pause to think, they interpret your hesitation as lack of commitment. They suggest the opportunity might not be right for you. They begin describing other candidates who would jump at the chance. Suddenly, you're not just evaluating an opportunity. You're competing for something you didn't want until they made it scarce. By the time you realize the deadline was fabricated, you've already committed. The opportunity wasn't exclusive. The timeline wasn't real. But you made a binding decision based on manufactured urgency, and now you're living with consequences that could have been avoided if you'd simply been given time to think. Machiavelli said that men are so simple and so subject to present necessities that he who seeks to deceive will always find someone who will allow himself to be deceived. But awareness breaks the spell. Once you recognize these patterns, you see them everywhere, in sales tactics, in relationship dynamics, in political messaging, in everyday interactions where someone wants something from you. The defense isn't cynicism. It's discernment. When someone offers unexpected generosity, ask what they might want later. When requests escalate gradually, notice the pattern before you're in too deep. When your reality is questioned, trust your memory. When affection becomes unpredictable, recognize the manipulation. When information seems incomplete, seek outside sources. When everyone supposedly agrees, verify independently. When urgency appears, create space to think. These 7 tricks have survived centuries because they work. But they only work on people who don't know they're being deployed. Now you know. And knowledge, as Machiavelli understood, is the only power that manipulation cannot overcome. Thank you so much for staying with me through this exploration. If you found value in today's discussion, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share this video with someone who might benefit from it.